welcome back. It is time for our monthly check-in with Springfield Mayor Jim Langfelder, live from the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library here on News Talk 94.7 and 970 WMAY. Mayor, as always, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me again.
Hope you had a good 4th of July and enjoyed the holiday.
Wasn't too bad. Relatively quiet.
It's not all that quiet around here in Springfield. We have a lot to talk about this afternoon, so I want to dive right into it. Obviously, since the last time we talked, one major development is that we now have a state budget and we have revenue for that budget. That should be unequivocally good news, but I know the city's a little bit concerned about the ramifications of that budget, what it means for money that comes to the city from the state. So give us the assessment again of what this budget means for Springfield's fiscal position.
Well, I guess the interim results, what we think may happen is, one thing is with regards to the local government distributed fund, those are the funds we receive for income tax. That could be a reduction this year of an estimated $800,000 or so. And then also the state's going to start charging for their administrative costs with regards to distributing the sales tax to municipalities. And so all that totaled should be, I guess, right now it's being estimated about $2.5 million.
I did see Speaker Madigan's chief budget negotiator say, no, you're misinterpreting it, and they're going to actually speed up payments from the local government distributed fund to the city. So they says you'll actually net more in this fiscal year than what you otherwise would have. But is that, because they says if they're speeding up payments, it sounds like you're not getting more money, you're just getting it a little sooner.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we'll, really with our budget, we can, it's based on what information is coming in when it is. So with the state, having their budget, it's the same situation. Ours will end at the end of February, so it's a wait and see approach to see if there's hopefully a rise in revenues due to the state having a budget. Hopefully people feel more free, especially the ones that work at the state government, feel more comfortable making those purchases that they may have been holding off on. But time will tell, and Director McCarty will give a report on a monthly basis to the City Council based on what the revenue sources are coming in, how soon are they coming in, is it as we budgeted, and how's that compared to our expenses.
Are you working on contingency plans if it does in fact wind up being a $2 million hit to the budget? Are you starting to map out how you absorb that?
Well, we do have a positive cash balance right now, but what we are doing is slowing down the hiring process. We did slow it down to at least 3 months after the last paycheck of an individual leaving the city, but we'll remain slowing that process down and really holding the line on expenses as much as possible. But it's a wait and see approach with regards to that. Next year's budget is really going to be the challenge. Is we'll really have a more firm grasp on how the last year's sales numbers are just an anomaly, or are they a true reflection of the trend that is forthcoming. And so that's how we'll have to gauge next year's budget, which will be tougher to craft than this year's.
So really at this point too soon to know how it's going to affect you, because there could be both good and bad coming from having the budget here.
Right, especially with the road projects. Remember, without the budget, they started closing down the road projects. That have been disastrous. So the 11th Street extension is back on schedule, and hopefully it'll be opened up sometime next year. The Stanford extension from Veterans all the way to Dirksen Parkway will be completed, and then again it will be closed to expand. I think it's next year we'll do some spring widening of the roads around Bunn Golf Course, and then the other one would be with regards to the Archer Elevator, the roundabout. And so that was really a concern because that's a high trafficked area. It's a 2-county road street, and really would have been disastrous if it went as that road being closed during the winter months as opposed to being open. But that should be completed by the end of November, hopefully.
Springfield Mayor Jim Langfelder with us here in our downtown studio inside the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. Let's move on now to TIF districts, another big issue right now in the city. We've had the ongoing debate that is still kind of in limbo right now on that proposed Hilltop TIF. Now there's a public discussion underway about a Peoria Road TIF as well. And let's talk about that just a little bit here as to what is the goal for that.
Well, the Peoria Road TIF is really a corridor for the Peoria Road area. Vic's Pizza, there used to be other development along that way that are no longer there, so it's really geared towards business development and takes in some of the surrounding areas. But to get to that point, PGAV, they're the TIF consultants. They come in and they do an analysis of the area as far as dilapidated properties, what's the value of the properties, and what's the best boundaries for the TIF. And that's what the hearing is for tonight up at the City Council chambers, is to get feedback from the general public, letting them know what the outlay of the TIF area would be, but it's mainly for that Peoria Road corridor and some of Sangamon Avenue to help spur development in those areas.
Does it also extend up North Grand Avenue as well? Does it get as far east as Langfelder Park as well?
Yes, it does take in Langfelder, and the other thing it does take in is the old Ursuline Academy campus, Benedictine, because that's an area of concern, because I think it's going to need some help and support, and those are some historic structures that we'd like to be able to utilize as best as possible.
Are you envisioning possibly using TIF funds for improvements to the ballpark?
Well, that's part of the area, so it could happen.
Can you use city TIF funds for a park district property?
That's a good question for an attorney, but that's what remains to be seen. What could happen is the sliders, and I'm not the attorney, they'd have to interpret it, but they probably could apply for funds to help in that regards, I would think. But helping another, well, I would imagine it could happen if it worked out, similar to what happened with Salvation Army. As you remember, that whole corridor, SMTD was involved with it, Sangamon County, so it depends how that is structured. It may be able to work or may not, but that's something that the attorneys would have to work with. But that is a historic ballpark, Robin Roberts Stadium, and something we want to build up if we can.
I just want to ask this as sort of a philosophical question, because it seems like we have really kind of ramped up the use of TIF districts in recent years, and particularly right now, we still have Governor Bruce Rauner, who desperately wants a property tax freeze. Right. Politically very popular, and we're heading into an election year, so you could certainly see a scenario where something like that could potentially be enacted at some point. How does that affect then a TIF district if you have a property tax freeze, but the whole point of the TIF is to use the incremental growth in property taxes in that district for improvements? Does that in effect impede those TIF districts if you have a property tax freeze? Yeah,
it could have an impact. Just for the record, city government hasn't raised property taxes since I think it's late 1980s. And so we actually have a self-imposed property tax freeze with regards to that. But you're right, it's based on the increment that's raised. So if those property taxes aren't increased, and that's what would need to be determined, because there's two ways to raise property taxes. It was my understanding that and we had this discussion with the Illinois Municipal League when we just met, my interpretation was that you couldn't raise property taxes. Well, the other part of it is the equalized assessed valuation of properties.
You got the levy, right, yeah.
And so it depends on what the freeze means. Is it just property tax rates, or is it really across the board rates and the evaluation? And so if it is the valuation, then that could have an impact on those TIFs. But really what would happen is hopefully you have developments within that, so you bring dilapidated or vacant properties back online and have an increase in the property tax through that development.
And we're predominantly now using city property taxes outside of TIF districts primarily for pension debt service, correct? So do all these TIFs make it harder for us to get a handle on our unfunded pension liability for police and fire?
Well, really what it does is freezes the property tax level at that point in time for that area. So, it's like a picture in time. So from that standpoint,
but we have a growing liability. So if we're freezing that level, that would seem like those would be working at cross purposes.
Well, what you hope is that you create additional development. Of course, in the interim or the short period, it's going to be a detriment with regards to that. But in the long term, when you look 10 years down the road or 20 years, whatever that TIF expires, hopefully those property taxes are a lot higher than what they were before the generation, because of the development that's taken place within the TIF that normally would not take place without those funds. And it's that, but for, if it wouldn't for the TIF, this project would not go. And that's really the equation that we try to fulfill in those projects.
Mayor, I was again kind of out of the loop last week on vacation. I am playing a little bit of catch up, so bring me up to speed on where we stand now with the Y block.
We did put out an additional request for information, mainly geared towards the finances, what would be requested from the three groups. if they'd be interested in co-partnering with any entities, and then really planned activities on the block, because whatever happens, we can build whatever, but will they come? And that's the concept with regards to that. And so they've submitted all 3 project proposals, had come back, and so we'll do the follow-up interviews next week and have those completed next week in hopes of a quick turnaround time within a couple weeks if we can get behind a project and move forward with it.
So you're thinking by the end of July you'll be able to settle on one idea and push ahead with it?
Let's see, it is what, July?
Today's the 13th.
13th? I would say probably into August a little bit. So
okay, all right.
That's really what we want to do, is take our time and make sure we, there's a once in a lifetime shot at getting it done right. And so that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that we have the proper match, and how do we move forward, not only impacting that immediate area, but really transforming downtown and the surrounding businesses that are associated with it.
We saw a nice turnout in that area. They did the Capital City celebration a couple of weeks back, right before the 4th of July, and it looked like a pretty good crowd downtown, and a lot of it centered on that block and right around there. Does that tell you anything about the prospects for success for this development?
Well, I appreciate your support. I think you were on stage doing some announcing when
Did
I
in
was
fact,
down there.
yes.
And then Springfield JC's for putting that on, and what we want to do is build on what they've been doing, and that's what it's all about in Springfield. How can we add to what's going on now and not duplicating? But yeah, it did give you a perception of how large that block is, what could happen. And walking around during and then after the event, it really shows you how large that space is, especially when I think people lose sight of the Jackson Street corridor in itself, and then what the realtors are doing. So if they have that plaza over there, that's really an extension of the Y block. And so when we're discussing, quite frankly, having an all green space, that you have to take that into consideration. What we want is to have usable space, maximize that return on investment if we have to put funds towards it, but really have an activated space that's well utilized for downtown and Springfield.
Sat in on a really good discussion with the Citizens Club about that Jackson Street corridor effort and what the realtors are doing in their block to be privately owned, and they would retain ownership of that, and then the rest of it from the mansion all the way back to the Lincoln's home. But let's talk again about, like you said, how to pay for it. And are you expecting there will have to be an additional city outlay for this, and can the city handle that? We know that finances are tight everywhere. Well,
of course, the first fund that you turn to in that situation would be TIF, but it really depends. It depends on what the requests are, and that's why we ask for additional information. Some are doing fundraising themselves, some are trying to put the pieces together, and that's what we really want to nail down in the second interview process is, what's really the price tag for the projects, how much are you going to bring to the table, and do you need city assistance with regards to that, and if so, what does that look like? Would it be in-kind services, or is it a true hard dollar amount that you're going to be asking for? So that's something that we hope to vet out during this second interview process and moving forward.
Let's talk about something else going on in downtown, and that is the ongoing discussion about taking some of these downtown streets from one-way to two-way. This has been a lively topic of discussion here, especially since the word came out this week that Monroe could be potentially added to that list. I know that this is the subject of ongoing study, and you have in the past talked about a bit of surprise at what it would cost to actually do this, but you haven't ruled this out. This is still something that you think is potentially viable.
Yeah, we're compared to a lot of communities, and when you go to a lot of the active downtowns, they have two-way streets, it's slowed up traffic, things of that nature. But really, in talking with the engineers, it's all about traffic count and what deems it necessary for one-way traffic. I think they use the 10,000 car count as the barometer, but that's something that we'll take into consideration. But the price tag, I was surprised in millions of dollars, and actually it was a lot higher when we first had the initial discussion, and then when they kind of did the preliminary discussions, it came down drastically. So really, people, or myself, I didn't think of two-way, both sides of the stoplight, and then redirecting traffic and all that. It does add up. So, but it's something I think could be utilized. Actually, my office is right on Monroe, so just yesterday someone turned took a wrong turn.
Seen it happen a lot of times over the years.
And
sure.
even 7th Street, all the way from North Grand to, I think it's to, or I'm not sure if it's all the way North Grand, but it goes to South Grand
yeah.
as one way. And I think it's, you know, lived its useful life, but we'll leave it up to the experts, the professionals, and really give us their opinion on turning that around, because it first came up, the concept first came up with the architectural ESTAT study and other studies that said those are one of the areas you can really transform things, is turning them to two-way streets.
Do you envision keeping all of the on-street parking on those streets if they go to two-way traffic? And then how many traffic lanes would we actually have in each direction?
Yeah, I think that's I was driving down Monroe, I'm thinking, how's this actually happen? Because you have parking on both sides and you have, I think, 2 lanes of traffic, so something has to give there. But that really comes to the study of traffic count and parking, things of that nature. The other item that, you know, I went to the Mayor's Institute on city design, and the project that they looked at in Springfield was downtown. And one of the things they suggested is really taking a look at our parking. I said, well, we've done parking studies with spaces, and they said, no, you need to take a look at what's available during the day, what's available at night. Can you overlap some of the activities going on and use those parking spaces that aren't used at nighttime or vice versa? And that's what we need to do as well, is take a look at, really do an analysis of our parking, really partner up with other entities that have parking lots available and see how we can utilize those as much as possible.
So that you might have a lane that's devoted to parking during the day, but would be a traffic lane at night?
No, this would be surface parking areas.
Oh, I see.
You know, there's some you know, churches or businesses or organizations that have parking lots that sit empty at night, or maybe during the day. Can we utilize those in that fashion? And if there's a plan that we can put in place to make that work.
When do you envision making a decision on this?
On the two-way?
On the two-way.
Actually, we have the ordinance coming forward to the City Council. I think it'll be filed at this City Council meeting, so it'll be committee as a whole and then heard or decided upon hopefully within 2 weeks from Tuesday.
Are the studies complete then, as far as?
No, that is to do the study.
Oh, okay. So, so you have to. Are you going to bring in outside? That's something just Public Works can do on its own. You're going to have to bring in somebody outside to do that.
Knight Engineering is the engineering firm that would be taking a look at it.
Okay. And what's that? Are you expecting that to cost for that study?
I think it was $150,000, approximately $150,000.
That's a pretty good chunk of change.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, you're basing this upon what other communities have done in their downtowns. Are you hearing a clamor from this community to say, we want two-way traffic downtown? We'd be more likely to come downtown if we could just, if we could go either direction on 7th Street or on Monroe. Is that something you're hearing from people?
Well, it depends who you talk to. I think, what I hear from people is downtown's not doing as well as it could. So, instead of being set back, when I ran, I said, we're going to take a look at the plans. We have plenty of studies. We need to put the suggestions into action. And so this is one way we could put it into action. And really, it's the engineering study, I imagine, would lay it all out as far as how it would be transformed, answer the question with regards to parking, do you reduce the lanes, be more in-depth. It's just not a study whether it work or not. I think it's more in-depth than that. But we'll have the full presentation at the committee as a whole, and then also at the future City Council meeting to have that discussion. And
Mayor, the last time we talked, we were at the beginning of June. We'd come through a very rough May here in Springfield with a whole rash of shootings and retaliatory actions that appeared to be a kind of a mini gang war. And then suddenly things got a whole lot better. We stopped seeing just that constant night after night after night of these shootings back and forth again. I don't want to jinx anything, and I'm looking for some wood to knock on here, but it has been a relatively quiet period. We've had a couple of incidents of violence, but they don't seem to be connected to that gang rivalry. What's happened here? Is this proactive police work? Is it just good fortune? What's behind that rapid and very stark change here in the community?
Well, I think it's a combination of the two, plus the community being active behind the scenes, similar to what the police are doing. They've, some of their investigative work has to take place, not in the forefront. So they've done a fantastic job. We can't thank our police officers enough for helping protect us. I think they've done a fantastic job, and it's really part of that is focused deterrence. It's a grant we did receive, and it's been a partnership with the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department, John Millhiser, State's Attorney, U.S. Attorney's Office, and others, state police, that have come together to really focus on the individuals that are considered to be the most likely to create trouble. So they've worked towards that kind of, under the radar, so to speak, and I think that's had something to do with it, but our day-to-day officers and how they have interacted with the community. I think the community have hopefully put the pressure on individuals, had a better looking out for one another and things of that nature. So I think it's just a combination of everything coming together. But really, if you have one shooting in a, we grew up in a time where you didn't have any shootings. And so now it's, those times have changed, but that's what we always want to strive for. Even if you can't make it, you hope to have that peaceful society that we enjoyed when we were growing up.
One of the big frustrations during that whole very violent period was the lack of cooperation. There'd be a shooting, police would come into an area, witnesses would say, we didn't see anything, nobody would want to talk. Is that changing now? Are we seeing a greater willingness for people in these areas that have been hit so hard by this violence to step forward and say, enough is enough, I'm going to do what I can to help bring people to justice?
I think it's a combination. Again, I think it's not out, tooting their own horn or being out in front, but it's more under the radar as far as, looking after one another, and then also, providing information or call in as soon as possible. The one shooting that happened, unfortunate situation, the tragic situation with Comer Cox Park.
Right.
Someone, had called in. I think the police were in the general vicinity, were able to respond real quickly, and they apprehended the 4 individuals riding in the vehicle. And what a lot of youth might not understand is if there's a gun involved in an incident and it's in the vehicle, everybody gets prosecuted for that. And that's what you saw is all 4 of those individuals, I believe it was 4, are falling or have the same charges against them with regards to the murder of that individual. And so that's one thing. What we're trying to do is work with the community and work hand in hand. That's what government's here to do, is serve the public. How best can we serve the public, working together to make our community as best as what we'd all like to have. And that's when we came up with some of the summer youth initiatives that we're moving forward with, and hopefully that helps give the young people an avenue to have positive activities, as opposed to being lured into the troublesome areas that they could go down.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that because this did come together pretty rapidly, all things considered, when we started to see this rash of violence, and a lot of young people expressing through various channels that sort of sense of hopelessness, that they're turning to violence because they don't feel like there's anything else out there for them. So you've come up with a series of youth activities with the Salvation Army, and this has really just gotten underway, so I know it's pretty soon to have a sense as to how it's working, but tell us what this entails and what you hope the outcome will be.
Well, to give you a quick glimpse, before school was out, we did have meetings with the Mr. Alliance and Boys and Girls Club, Urban League, and some other entities with regards to what can we be doing for summertime activities, youth employment. Well, the funds weren't there to do things, so we were planning for next year. With the rash of violence, we said we can't wait, we need to do something now. So we did have a public announcement, so to speak, so we had a lot of organizations and business communities come together and really state their concern and moving forward in a direction. And so the City Council did allocate $100,000 in community development block grant funds for the initiatives that qualify under federal guidelines of those activities, and then also the business community had pledged $35,000, and that was just in a short time frame. But really, hats off to the outlet. Michael Fallon's done great work there. He had a program at night on Mondays with the Abundant Faith Christian Center, Pastor Doss there, and what they've done is expanded that program to bring it over to the Salvation Army Monday through Friday. So we have those nighttime activities. It used to be Gold's Gym. It's a great facility. We're glad Salvation Army is working with them to get it open. Juan Huerta, the Community Relations Director for the city, is helping coordinate that as well. So it did come together fast, but it's kicked off this week, and hopefully the word will get out so we can have a lot more participation. And right now I think there's around 40 young people involved, but there's other programs too. The Urban League, in partnership with the NAACP, they're expanding their program, so it goes not till the end of July, but through middle of August, so you have that through when school would start and things of that nature. So you know, it's a lot of great entities coming together, and what we're trying to do is fill the gap. You know, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to create something that's already out there. So really, what was pointed out in the community discussions was the need for nighttime activities for the youth, youth employment, and then also mentoring. And that's something that we're going to have to work towards, because we're just not looking at addressing summertime activities, but this is a wake-up call for Springfield and other communities, just not Springfield, but for others to have programming in place or a strategic plan in place for our youth to get them through life for years to come.
The program at the Salvation Army, and this is weeknights, 6 to 10 p.m. It does have, and it's very well suited facility for it, basketball and fitness classes and things like that, but there's also discussions on leadership and young men living up to their potential, all those sorts of things as well. But as you noted, these are summertime evening activities, runs through September 1st. Are there plans for greater youth employment that can extend beyond this and get into the fall and year-round? Because that seems to be one of the big issues that a lot of these young people are facing, is they don't see any economic opportunity, any way to make money other than this gang involvement and whatever criminal means they can find to generate some cash for themselves.
And that's the area we were striving for when Pastor Hill, the Minister of Alliance, approached me initially, and before, you know, in the spring. That's what we were talking towards, is, you know, how do we get youth employment? So you know, for the city ourselves, we did set up a process where the Minister of Alliance could recommend young individuals in kind of as a sponsorship format, and we have hired, I believe, at least 10 of those individuals, you know, for summer employment. But what we want to do is work towards next summer. How do we get the business community involved? And you know, and the other part is from 13 to 15. Those the individuals that can't work, and you know, how do you incentivize them to come to programs, because you know they don't want to participate sometimes, so you have to motivate them to see that it is meaningful for them. So that's something we're trying to work through, some type of motivational process. You know, the leadership aspect is one piece of it. Another piece might be, you know, a small stipend if they participate at 100% level or what have you. But this is a work in progress. It's something that's, you know, it doesn't have everything ironed out perfectly, but we had to do something, and we're moving forward in a progressive manner as quickly as possible.
And Mayor, we had to take a break before we really got a chance to wrap up the discussion about the efforts to stem the gang violence and to give young people hope. And I think, again, I don't want to count the chickens before they're hatched, but we've seen just a dramatic improvement in the last month and a half, and you have to acknowledge that, as you have already, this has been really a community-wide effort, not just police, not just the private sector, not just community groups, but everybody pitching in together.
Right, and the one aspect I think moving forward is what came out loud and clear is the mentoringship, because you know the youth that go down that path, they're turning to somebody that's not a great role model. And so, you know, we have organizations like Faith Coalition for the Common Good, 1 in a Million, Minister Alliance. They've approached us about having mentoring programs, and it reminds me similar of Big Brother, Big Sister. And I was at Innovate Springfield earlier this week, I think it was yesterday, with a panel discussion on how you can have some type of you know, fund created, philanthropy fund that would not only help with regards to a social activity or address a social need like the mentoring, but also help the business community. And when you think about mentoring, that's what we're talking about, is having a qualified workforce in the future. So you want to get them on the right path. I know School District 186 had a program called Talks at one time, and so it identified kids that are at risk, might not be performing well at school or what have you, and we need to set up that mechanism, bringing all the groups together under one umbrella, to address that need to provide that mentorship for our youth, because they are our future workforce. And that will, when we talk about bringing businesses to Springfield, we have low unemployment. We need to have a qualified workforce and increase that workforce as much as possible, and that's one way to have that happen.
Is that an idea where the city would take the lead, or the chamber, or who would really spearhead that?
I think it's a combination. I think the one thing I have learned as being mayor is that's what it brings is influence. So if I call or ask, it does bring people to the table, and that's what we want to do, is bring people to the table, have them working together towards the common goal, because we had a lot of proposals come forward, and a lot of them had some consistency, and the one goal was mentoring a lot of our youth, and how can we make that happen as working together as much as possible.
Let's let you put your influence to work in another arena that we're just learning about today, but we're already hearing a lot about it. They're changing the State Fair parade this year, and based upon what I'm seeing online, the map of the parade route, it means that it's going to start in Lincoln Park. About half of it's going to be inside Lincoln Park, and then it's going to go out the side there to Sangamon Avenue, and down Sangamon Avenue just to the main gate, and then turn left into the main gate, and that's going to be the parade. That's going to be it. Instead of 9th and North Grand and down Peoria Road to Sangamon at the fairgrounds, it's going to be a lot shorter here. And everything we're hearing so far is people are really unhappy about this.
Right.
Were you consulted about it, or did they?
Was I consulted? No, we didn't. Really, what they do is put in a request for blocking roads. That's the extent of what the city participates in. But it was mentioned, they're going to do it, and we said that's a bad move because you're messing with tradition, and really, it's a great way to bring out the community. I don't think they understand the thousands of people that come out and enjoy it, but they're in front of businesses along the corridor, and it's just a great momentum building for the fair, having that long procession. I know it's long at times, but shortening it up is not the answer. So that's unfortunate, because for me that's not the right route to take. Other than that,
are you looking forward to the fair?
Yeah, I am. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully make it out a couple days, but how I plan my days, I look at my phone probably the night before and see what tomorrow brings.
I know exactly
because
how
it's
that
jam-packed, and a lot of times being mayor, it changes. So, I hope to get out there a time or two, and hopefully everybody gets out. Having the state budget hopefully will help with attendance and raises the level of activity out there, and it will reap benefits for Springfield as much as it picks up.
If you've looked ahead on your calendar for the next couple of days, is the Amaranth Apple Festival downtown on your agenda for the next day or two?
It's on my radar, and actually we have the American Legion in town. They're celebrating their 100th anniversary the same time as the Illinois Bicentennial, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
But they have a music festival of their own at the same time. But the Amaranth Apple Festival is Friday night, and of course Saturday. We plan on coming down for that, so that'll be a great event and great way to be downtown and enjoy downtown. And there'll be food trucks, which we appreciate.
The food trucks. We only got a minute left here. Are the food trucks all angry at you? I mean, you kind of changed the rules on them in midstream.
Well, what it was is you have to have that proper balance. So as mayor, I have to look at the entire, downtown and how we can live in harmony with the food trucks and the restaurants. And that's what it comes down to, is because our restaurants, they pay property taxes, they employ people, through lunch and dinner. Food trucks can come where the activity is and leave. But there's, we had a good compromise, I thought. They were originally parked right outside the convention center during a convention, where it just intercepts all the foot traffic to restaurants. And I just asked them to move to the other side, or told them to move to the other side between Horace Mann and Convention Center. So I think it resolved it, but what we'll do is at the end of the year take a look at it, but it's, they have places to park, and we offer plenty of space, and we just appreciate them being downtown, especially for the festivals.
We're out of time, Mayor. Appreciate it. 5 o'clock, WMAY Springfield, W234CC Sherman. More of the show on the way.